Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Jay Paget. I'm the program director for the Cultural Facilities Fund in Massachusetts, which is a program for capital improvements and planning for cultural facilities, and it's run by the Mass Cultural Council and it's run by Mass Development. Now, this program has been up and running for about 17 years, and thankfully, most of the elected officials have seen the value and the benefit of investing in cultural facilities infrastructure because it's tied to economic development in town. It's tied to the well-being of the artists and the performers in town, and it's also tied to sort of an economic impact that we've seen and measured throughout the years. So I think we've accomplished doing close to 1,600 grants in the 18 years we've been doing this, for about 175 million. Mm-hmm. And that figure is part of a $2.1 billion construction total development cost of all the cultural facilities we've worked with. And most of the cultural facilities, as you know, are small and mid-sized, because that's the way it works in the Commonwealth. There are some of the bigger players, and they're great, the museums and theaters and things like that. But more than 50% goes to organizations with budgets, well under $1 million. So it's been super helpful. So the reason we're here today is that one of the trends that we've been completely fascinated with at the Cultural Facilities Fund is the repurposing of public municipal spaces for creative and arts purposes. So it's such a great story that we're here today in Easthampton with Burns Maxey, the current president of CitySpace, Mike Tautznik, the former mayor of Easthampton and also a current treasurer, and then Ed Check, who is the co-founder and current board member. So welcome to you all. I want to thank you a lot for taking the time to tell this story, because what we find is that other municipalities are interested in what you're doing, and we think if we talk about it in depth, and then we document some of the accomplishments you've made, perhaps we can provide insight to others and give them hope, but also give them a dose of reality, because it's wonderful, but it just ain't easy, right?
Takes a lot of tenacity.
So I think, Burns, if we could start with you, why don't you tell us about CitySpace and give us a picture of what it is, what it does, where it is, so folks get an overview.
Sure. So CitySpace is a nonprofit arts organization that is located in Old Town Hall. We manage Old Town Hall as a center for the arts in Easthampton. It's centrally located on Main Street. It's in a beautiful building that was built in 1869, an Italianate design building that is often mistaken for a church, but was originally made for the town offices. So it was where you could go to pay your taxes, or you could go to the first library that was there. You could go to community events on the second floor. And CitySpace was the nonprofit that, once the city offices left in the early 2000s, that CitySpace came in and said, hey, we'd love to make this an arts and cultural facility. How can we do this? And since that time, we'll go in more depth about that for sure. We have developed the first floor and are restoring the second floor as a community arts venue. It's activated right now as a space for galleries, retail space, so it's a mixture of nonprofit, for-profit, and municipality all under one roof. We also have performances in the building and a 100-seat person space, and it is a place for all kinds of things to happen, whether it's musical events or theater, community convenings, for people to come together and really enjoy the space and connect and find new artistic experiences under one roof.
So that talks about what's happening now. And now we're gonna turn the hands of time back a little bit, because I think it's going to be instructive for folks to know how the city of Easthampton as it was, moving out of town hall and then figuring out what to do with this building next, what happened at that time, and then what stars had to align for it to kind of move into the direction that it is now? Mike, do you want to address that?
It sounds easier than it was.
Right.
So Easthampton became a city in 1996. We were a town prior to that. As we began to talk to the community about long-range plans and the like, we also looked at how can we be more efficient. And the town was operating in 4 different locations, and so you never were sure as a citizen exactly which building to go to, depending on what you wanted to do. So we began thinking about, can we restore this beautiful 1869 building as an office space? Got some preliminary estimates on that. Discovered that it was going to be a lot more expensive than just buying space somewhere. There happened to be a Class A office building for sale next to a public safety complex that we had built in 1996. And we were able to get into that for less than half the cost of redeveloping the building. The city consolidated all of its offices in a single place, including the school department. And we ended up with 3 vacant buildings. A couple of them were, they're nice buildings and all, but they really didn't serve a lot of historic value to the community. So we moved forward with the purchase of the building in 2002. We moved in 2003, spent the next year or so disposing of 2 buildings and thinking about what do we do with this historic town hall. Beautiful building. Old buildings need a lot of work. It needed a lot of work, but it just had so much potential. We opted to go out with an RFP. So through the deliberations, decided that it needs to be a community space. So we went out with a pretty open RFP about let's reuse this building for some purpose. Who can rent it? So we knew that trying to find someone who would buy and maintain an older building probably wasn't the best thing to do in the first year. So we went out with an RFP, solicited some input. We received in the first RFP, I think we received 2 proposals that didn't meet the intent of the RFP. So we sat back, rewrote the RFP, and ultimately in 2005, or I think in 2005, we came out with a second RFP that CitySpace responded to. With a wonderful proposal that matched exactly what we were looking for in the RFP. And so we initiated a short-term, a 10-year lease with them to operate the building at the city's expense. So they paid a pretty low lease price to the city, and the city continued to maintain the building, provide heat, light, most general maintenance for that first 10-year term. And that gave CitySpace some time to develop itself and to come up with ideas and ways for it to be able to generate revenue. They did some subleasing to begin with. And then we can talk more about this later, but then the organization has turned into an organization that doesn't just manage the building now. Ultimately, we ended up with a 44-year lease. Correct. And full responsibility for the building.
With CitySpace at this
with
point.
CitySpace.
Okay, so there was a getting up to speed 10-year period, which is a good amount of time to know what the condition of the building is, what it may need in the next few years. So Ed, I want to ask you. So I didn't realize CitySpace had existed as an arts organization prior to the RFP coming out. Can you talk about that?
Once Mike was the mayor at the time, once the proposal was accepted, that's when Will Bundy and I applied to be a 501c3 nonprofit under the name of CitySpace. So we had to go through those steps first.
So you kind of saw the RFP as an opportunity to create something,
yes,
an entity in town.
Yes.
Okay, and did that happen simultaneously, or did you get the C3 status before the building? You signed the lease for the building, or?
I believe we signed the lease first but we knew what our mission was.
Right.
And a parallel story, how Mike was talking about different buildings, had different offices in them. The arts scene in Easthampton at the time was similar. It's like there were different art organizations and councils, but they were all spread out in the city. And Easthampton City Arts, the Cultural Council, and then just other ones. And when Will and I started talking about one of these community get-togethers that the city at the time was hosting, and it's just interesting how I met Will was because a lot, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 people showed up, but then they put you into little groups so you can discuss ideas. And Will happened to be in the group that I was in, which was only 4 or 5 people. And that's how we met.
Yep.
And I was saying, when we were thinking about, and we knew Town Hall was empty. And I was saying, at the time I was on the local cultural council.
Okay.
And I said, it would be, there's this beautiful historic building. The architecture is beautiful, right in the middle of town, perfect location. What if we had the opportunity, to rent this building, let's get all of these art organizations under one roof. And that became, it was clear what the mission was going to be, that we would have a place that was dedicated to the arts, the fine arts and performing arts, and the community, to host their events.
So did the other arts institutions in town have a physical space at that time, or
some did, some
Okay.
didn't. Like, for instance, the cultural council that I was on, we met in the conference room in the fire department that building. So no, I mean that's what I meant. Everybody was meeting like just wherever they can find a space.
So there was a need for
Yeah,
space for
absolutely.
the arts and cultural community.
Absolutely.
Now, Burns, were you working in Easthampton at the time?
I wasn't.
Okay.
I came on board later when I had moved to Easthampton, and much of this had already been established. The RFP and CitySpace coming into the building, and the downstairs was just beginning to start to be populated with the organizations. And I was asked to join the board. I worked at a local school and said, okay, I'll join this board. And I learned a lot about what CitySpace was all about. And it was really just, the board was talking about really the first floor at that point. And how can we really enliven the space and make sure that, we have tenants in the building and that we're making sure that the building is safe and secure for people to come in and that kind of thing that, a venue manager would consider. Or a building manager more than a venue manager. We had, I believe, Big Red Frame was the first tenant to come into the building, and they are a frame store as well as having a gallery. And so they were part of that RFP process, and they knew they had that first tenant. And then the other tenants came on board within the building.
Okay.
And it was the intention, because I was on the cultural council, to bring the cultural council into the building too as another tenant,
Okay.
which is why they have that.
And they have a gallery there.
Yeah.
And
they have-
Easthampton City Arts is part of the city of Easthampton. It's part of the planning department. It's essentially like a committee of the planning department, and they have a gallery space that exists within the building. Later on, I joined the city of Easthampton as the arts coordinator for the city, and I was a host of that gallery space in the building and became essentially a tenant of CitySpace.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of synergy with community-based organizations, and you were moving from community work into a role with the municipality.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that there's this 10-year kind of grace period that the city offered for the entity to get up and running on its feet. But even, so the RFP was issued for the second time and the second time you struck gold, so to speak.
Exactly.
You found the right.
And we had mentioned Will Bundy, and Will owns Eastworks, the facility we're in today, and he was developing it at that time, had been into it for 4 or 5 years. He took a keen interest in what we were doing. He took a keen interest in these outreach activities we were doing with the citizens, and he was following the idea of what we're going to do with that building very closely. So it's not surprising that he struck up a conversation with you about how can we work together. So it's important to have the private sector, behind you. Government can do lots of things, and we were lucky. I mean, I believed in the vision that arts can renew this community. Our master planning directed us that way. But without having the private sector supportive of it, you'd be bucking headwinds. So one of the most important things is that really the citizens in the community got behind the idea that we don't have to sell this beautiful building. We can use it as an opportunity, as opposed to we got to get rid of it. It's an eyesore. It's an old building. We can't use it. Let's just get rid of it. And that's an important mindset.
And it remains open to the public to this day, which is a big factor. So as the city, was there code or zoning work that needed to be done before CitySpace signed the lease, or at that time?
There was code and zoning work that had to be done, but it was done years earlier.
Yeah.
So Easthampton is historically a textile industry town, a mill town, typical New England mill town. Mm-hmm. We have lots of big old buildings with no parking lots. When the manufacturing moved out during the late 60s and into the early 80s and these buildings became vacant, it became pretty clear to some of us who were involved in government. In the town side, I was involved in town government for probably about 23 years before we became the city. That there needed to be a different mindset about buildings. Mm-hmm. So zoning changed to allow these older buildings to circumvent this prescriptive requirements that's in most zoning. You need 1.5 parking spaces for every so many thousand square feet of whatever particular use. All of the older buildings in town that were built before we started zoning, so that was probably built before the 70s, are exempt from parking requirements, which is the biggest hurdle at Old Town Hall is parking.
Okay.
So that would have, under traditional zoning, that would have been a showstopper.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So as you renovate and repurpose the building, does that trigger a zoning review? Because
Nope.
the building obviously was built before the current zoning, so it stayed constant with the old zoning, and then as it got renovated, didn't trigger any new.
Doesn't trigger anything. Not under
Okay.
our zoning. It doesn't trigger anything.
Okay.
Obviously, when you go through the permitting process, that the city is concerned that you're thinking about those sorts of things, but there were no major roadblocks based on city zoning.
So Ed, did you sign the lease? You sign the lease?
There's great irony here. I was one of because there was 3 of us.
Okay.
Will was the president, and I was the treasurer. Mike is our treasurer now, who has so much more experience than I do. So yeah, I was one of the first ones to sign the lease, and just you were talking about this being maybe an example for other people. I went into this knowing nothing. I am a professional set designer. I teach at Smith College. I didn't even know what a 501c3 was until Will explained it to me and what the steps were that we had to take to do it. And so the first 10 years was a complete learning curve. And talk about just sticking with your mission and just having faith that this will happen. Because there were years that I didn't know if it would last. I mean, it's like there was a board meeting and maybe 3 people were there. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how is this going to happen? It changed when Burns joined us, because she's a magnificent leader, and she saved us.
So you signed the lease in 2005-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the irony is that it's 20 years.
It's 20 years.
Almost
you've
20
had-
years.
Okay.
And so just to give you some idea of how long it does take.
Did you have legal assistance in looking at the lease?
Yes.
I mean, you had to,
Yeah.
because we're talking, in a lot of these projects, there is a community-based nonprofit, there's the town, and one is issuing a lease and one is signing a lease. It sounds like it was a healthy relationship, because I can't give you kudos enough for having an on-ramp for this to, that 10-year on-ramp where you were taking the care of the capital needs, because we see a lot of projects that can kind of break even with operations, but as soon as you add in, a $90,000, $100,000 roof, it throws things out of balance a bit. So I'm kind of curious, in that 10-year period, how much investment did the building need, and did you hand off like a capital needs assessment to CitySpace so they knew the future needs of the building?
One of the first things we did was apply to the MCC for the facilities review.
the systems replacement
plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay,
And that was really helpful.
Oh,
That-
good.
It gave us a 20-year
absolutely.
outlook. We look at it just like we look at our city's master plan,
Yep.
and review what are our needs, what's coming up, and it's very helpful in that way.
It prioritized things, and that really was the stepping stone, that document, and then getting some of the other surveys about what's needed in the community.
Yeah, so along the way, one of the successes I would say of this project has been where you started off, in meeting well, along the
Right.
way there has been continued community conversations about the future of the building. So it's not siloed, it's not an isolated project. We are reaching out to partners and people throughout the community and now throughout the region to say, these are our plans. What do you think? And help us get to the next stage. And it gives us a lot of insights of what will work. And it makes a lot of sense because these are the folks that will be utilizing the space as partners, as renters, as cohorts with our own programs as we move forward.
And the first floor has been leased and active for many years now.
Correct.
And tell us about the second floor. That's an auditorium, correct?
It's a great, big, beautiful space. So the first floor has essentially four separate rooms to it, a larger room in the back for that 100-seat facility, 2 gallery spaces in the front, and some storage for that back room. The second floor, you go into the space, and it is this bold space that has 50-foot ceilings, stained glass windows, just a wide open space with no columns. It's about 3,500 square feet, and a stage in the back that was added on later on. But it was always used for performances and community gatherings, sock hops. I've met many people that have had their first kiss there, and it has a lot of history in that space. It's a place where the community has come together. And you mentioned the mill towns. The Easthampton's a typical mill town. Something that really differs from other mill towns in the area is that it was never a wealthy mill town. So we have Holyoke and Springfield and Northampton, but we didn't have a lot of big, beautiful buildings. So they knew when they created this space, they wanted to make it for a larger population. It was only about 3,000 people in Easthampton at the time, so now we have about 16,000 folks. They wanted to make a beautiful building that was the gem of the city, where people would come together. So that space will be a 350-seat performing arts venue. We'll take much of what we're doing on the first floor Blue Room, which is that 100-seat space, and take it upstairs. It'll be for traveling artists, for regional artists to perform, and we'll be providing our own programming, as well as it'll be a rental facility. So we have a sort of a multi-layered income opportunity for that space. It's a flexible space and can be used for all different kinds of things.
So that's the new chapter, right?
Yeah.
That you've got the first floor stabilized. Is the operating sort of model working as far as the revenue and the expense and the insurance? You cover the insurance as the owner of the building or some of the occupants?
So the city still covers the primary building insurance.
Okay.
It is still their building. CitySpace has a personal property plan or insurance policy. We have liability policies. We have a director's policy. So we provide a level of insurance, but the building itself remains insured by the city since they remain the owner of the building, and we are simply lessees.
The first lease was 10 years, and the second lease, you said, was how many years?
The first lease was 10 years. The second, I think, was 2.
It was 2 years.
So there was a change. There was a change in leadership here in the community. There was a new mayor, but at the same time, there was this idea that in order to be able to fulfill the mission of CitySpace, they really needed control of the building. City still doesn't want to sell the building, and we're happy about that. Yeah. But in order to have control, so we can go for tax credits and other programs, we needed a long-term lease. So it took a couple of years to develop that. So there was a short period of time when it was short leases just to get going. And then under Mayor LaChapelle, we were able to get the state legislature to approve a long-term lease, because in Massachusetts, the community can only go to 10 years. It can't go beyond that. So it could be a series of 10s, I guess, but it doesn't give the nonprofit the sufficient control to be able to make the kind of investments that they're making.
So when you talk about the investments that are helped along by a longer term lease, you said, is that historic tax credits?
Well, that's one.
Are there others?
Well, as part of this learning curve, it was really Burns, because as we were researching which grants to apply for, there's so many grants out there, you discovered that in order for us to apply, we have to have a long-term lease.
Sure.
I think you brought it to our attention, and that's where this...
And you brought it to the city council.
Yeah, and this is where this 44 number came from. I guess an odd number.
And I think that's something that so many people ask about is, how did you get this long-term lease? What does the lease look like? What is the process? And it was really a fascinating process to me, because it was an eye-opener as well, that I think we had a city councilor that put it forward. Then it had to go to the legislature, be approved, and then go back to the mayor. The RFP was created. We responded to the RFP, and we were awarded the long-term lease.
So it got RFP'd again.
Yeah.
It has to.
It was a little nerve-wracking, you know?
Someone else could scoop in. Did anyone else apply?
Nobody else
No?
applied.
Okay.
Yes.
As I said, the community's pretty supportive of this initiative, and so I think everyone in the community was saying, okay, well, let's CitySpace get going here. So we didn't see a lot, even early on, we didn't see a lot of competition. Once CitySpace came on the scene, so to speak, they garnered a lot of public support, and there is still a lot of public support behind the organization.
Absolutely.
I would like to believe that the city was glad we were taking care of the building. It was one less thing on the list of things to do in the city. At least they had a group who was caring for this building.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the city had made some major investments in the building. In 1998, we actually rebuilt all the underpinning in the building, all the support columns in the building. They were, 140-year-old brick columns, and they were failing. In 2001, put a new roof on the entire structure, slate roof. And so the envelope of the building was sound. But you're right, and I don't think this matters where you go. If you have 10 things you need to fund, and one of them is a building you're not occupying, it gets to the bottom of the list. And even though, my first mayor's office was in that building, and I love that building personally, but it's still hard to get it to rise in the competition for things that most of the people use every day. Public safety complexes, schools. I mean, there's so much that can be spent on that trying to get money for an older building like this was very difficult. The Community Preservation Act was a godsend for the entire community, but certainly for CitySpace and its efforts to renovate the building.
Yeah, I'm hopefully this YouTube be on YouTube, and there may be folks listening from outside Massachusetts, but the Community Preservation Act came into existence, I think, about 20 years ago. Maybe I'm off a little bit, but there's a surcharge on property tax of between 1 and 3% that's voted on by the town, and those dollars are used for affordable housing, open space preservation, and historic building preservation. So as you said, Easthampton has passed Community Preservation Act, CPA, and that's been a source of
Well, it's a source
capital for the building.
It's a source of funding that has much less competition. You're not, it's not competing against funding your schools or funding public safety or funding highways. It's specifically for those reasons that you said, and so it's a much smaller, it's a smaller amount of money, but it's a smaller pool of applicants. So there is a way over time to be able to share that effectively in a community. I mean, I can certainly say that we wouldn't be where we are without the Community Preservation Act.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
Funding is huge especially for a small nonprofit. We have a wonderful business plan. I mean, Burns and the board, we've worked closely together to come up with a plan that keeps the operation running in the black. Cash flow is sometimes an issue, but it works. And this business plan that we have will easily morph into a better plan once we get better space, once we get the second floor. So we're talking about the second floor. I mean, the ultimate desire here is to create a 350-seat entertainment space, state-of-the-art entertainment space in this 1869 building. We are out to bid, and we've opened bids on an elevator to make the building fully accessible. So you mentioned code. The biggest code problem that we have is access.
Yeah.
And so the city, prior to selling the building, put sprinklers in the building. So the building has been updated to a great extent, but we don't have access to all the floors. We only have access to the first floor.
You have access to the first floor.
That's
okay.
all. And so that's really the only floor that we can effectively use.
2 public floors in this building?
There's the main floor, which is the one we've developed. There's the second floor, which is the auditorium, and of course there's a full basement. And there's also a balcony in the auditorium, which is wonderful space.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful.
We used to have town meetings there. So just to go back a little bit, when we were still a town, we had a representative town meeting, 135 or 36 people, and we would meet in that room, all 136 of us, to legislate. So it's wonderful to look at it now, remember what it was when I first got involved as a young man in government, and to see where it's going, and it makes my heart shine.
I'm glad you brought up town meeting, because in Massachusetts, the other 2 projects we're going to feature are towns. So it will go to town meeting. And there's a dynamic there that is different than if it's a city with a council and an elected mayor. But it's good to underscore the fact that you had just changed from being a town to a city, and probably were acting more like a town, which is great because you're including a lot of voices that you both spoke about. There's a couple more things I want to cover. One, I don't want to harp on it, but it's the 44-year lease, and what is CitySpace as a 501c3 responsible for as far as care for the building, and is there anything left for the municipality to care for the building since they're leasing it to you? Do they take care of the envelope in any of the systems, or is it all on
They
you guys?
started to do certain things, but throughout the years, they started to hand those things to
Well, the
us.
44-year lease, right.
Yeah.
The 44-year lease is essentially release the city of the entire care of the building. So CitySpace manages the building in full. They, as Mike mentioned, hold the insurance on the building, which is incredibly important. And they also lease out the tower in the building to a T-Mobile. So we maintain it inside and out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And out, like So
And we pay the utilities.
Yeah.
We pay the
we
So
pay
for,
the
if
electric,
there's
water.
a storm,
We being CitySpace?
Yeah.
We being CitySpace.
got it.
yeah, if there's a
Correct.
storm,
Right.
we have to hire somebody to do the sidewalks and.
I mean, so that,
Yeah.
you didn't, probably wouldn't have got the 40-foot lease unless you stepped in and said, we're gonna,
Or,
is
yeah.
that
We'll
part
do
of the
this piece.
negotiation?
Correct.
And take care of all the capital needs?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And it was a big step for us to go from, having some of this care of the building to then maintaining it completely. So suddenly you're really thinking about the rooftop, and you're thinking about the basement, you're thinking about the HVAC and how it functions, and is it working correctly?
And who sands and salts, and who mows the lawn,
And
and
pest control.
Right?
pest
Yeah,
control.
pest control, snow removal.
In the very old building.
Yeah. No, the responsibilities really increased quite a bit. I'm glad you mentioned the systems replacement plan that the Mass Cultural Council and Mass Development offer through this program. And I would encourage any other 501c3
Yeah.
that's working in the arts and owns a building to come in and get that capital needs assessment done, because when people and staff and board change over, you still have a document there
Yes.
that guides you a little bit. Now, you spoke of the business plan going forward. I'm glad to hear that, because getting into booking live entertainment with national touring acts is a skill in and of itself,
Absolutely.
mixed with community acts. But I think sometimes you're bringing in folks from the region or from around the country, and that requires a business plan. Now, I want to touch briefly on couple things. One is the lessons you've sort of learned, generally speaking. I know we've talked about a lot already, but just in the spirit of communicating to others who may be a municipality, who may be a 501c3, who are looking to do this partnership where they've got a school, they've got a town hall, they've got a firehouse, that they built a new firehouse, and now they've got the old one there.
Yes.
Is there just any general advice or recommendations or lessons learned you want to communicate to others?
The first thing that I ever say to that question is you need champions. You need to find people
Yes.
who are willing to be the champion for that. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be. We were lucky here, I think, because government was part of the championship.
Yeah.
We wanted to do this as government. But that isn't always the case. But you need people who have a passion and who are willing to talk to others and willing to answer the hard questions and to rethink what you're doing, because maybe you've learned something new and you can't stick to what you thought when you began. That road isn't necessarily the road you're going to end up on. I mean, we're not on the road that CitySpace started on.
Right.
We couldn't be, because we wouldn't have been successful.
Exactly.
And so, first of all, champions. Secondly, you do need, if it's a public building, you certainly need cooperation from the government. You need to find champions in government, or at least people who are willing to listen, and people who are willing to try to understand the complexities of doing something like this. When you're the municipality, you have fairly deep pockets. You don't have to worry too much about cash flow. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, when you're a small fledgling organization, it's very difficult to be able to move forward and fight all the time. So you don't want to be fighting. You want to be talking things through and getting people to understand, and hopefully convincing them that, oh, that's a great idea. But being open, I think, was a great thing for CitySpace. I mean, speaking from the government side, when CitySpace came in, when Will approached me first about the idea, it'd be great for an arts venue. And then when Will and Ed got together and responded to the RFP, I mean, it really was the kind of thing that all the pieces fell into place.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's sort of like a puzzle,
Yeah.
bringing together the right skills of different people into one space. I mean, these two have such amazing skills that they bring to the table, and our full board is that way, along with the folks who work for us and the artist advisory committee and the municipality. It takes a village, as they say, but bringing the right pieces to the puzzle together is what makes it work.
And Mass Cultural Council was
Yeah.
a lot of pieces to that puzzle.
Absolutely.
Because I think our second grant that we received was for the lobby, right? It was a batch grant?
It was not. It was actually
was
for the plans for the second floor.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Because, I think that's important for people to know too, that when you apply, especially to MCC, that there's an order that is best to apply for those grants.
Right.
And you don't know that at first.
Right.
And then that was something that we learned. And you could talk about that.
Yeah, I do talk about that a lot. We'll do a separate interview. I'll interview myself. Sorry.
But I mentioned that because what I'm really saying is go to the website. You learn so much from the website.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're gonna post this on the website. We'll have. We want to thank Easthampton Media for having us, inviting us in to do this conversation. And the Cultural Facilities Fund has touched this space too. So it's a great asset that the Commonwealth has created. Was there another project that you could riff on, and that you saw, another town hall or another municipal building that you were looking at or talking to in order to sort of get advice? Like we're trying to use this to help others. Was anyone ahead of you, or were you kind of out in front? Because there's not a lot of.
I don't think that I saw any examples of that.
There's a similarity that Northampton has the Academy of Music, but that whole situation is very different.
Yeah.
It's not. First of all, the building was designed to be a performance space, where Old Town Hall in Easthampton wasn't.
Right.
And even though it's a city-owned building, I do believe the government contributes to that.
Well, I think over the
budget.
years the structure has changed a bit.
Yeah.
I think at one time they were primarily responsible for the building. It seems to me that, and I can't speak directly to this, but it seems as though the board at the Academy has taken on more responsibility that way.
But again, they have a very different model and mission.
And I mean, this region has a great wealth of artists and arts organizations that have been an inspiration, I think, for CitySpace to come to fruition and say, there's a place for this. We're not in an arts desert. We have a lot happening within this region, and Easthampton is really situated, centrally located in the region, that it makes a lot of sense to have this type of venue where it is. I will say CitySpace did things very differently than a lot of organizations. We didn't start with the programming. The programming came, 14 years later, 15 years later. So it's very different in that way. We were a management entity, developed the programming, and somewhere in there launched a capital campaign. And we have sort of a different route than so many other organizations have. But I would say really just this area is the inspiration for the work that we do in a lot of ways.
Well, I want to thank the three of you for sharing your knowledge and your experience. I think it's going to be very helpful. So Burns, Mike, Ed, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
And we'll stop here, but there'll be more to come, because buildings in programming always march on. There's always a need. Thank you very much.
Thank you.